What's up, you guys? Mighty Mike here, and I am super excited about today's guest. Today's guest is a short-term rental expert, and my camera is, this will be fun. My little cute thing to get you guys distracted is messed up my camera. Oh. Okay, hold on. Good thing we're not live. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to dive in everything. If you've ever wanted to know about short-term rentals, we are actually going to dive in, and Avery Carl is that expert that you would want to hear from. And I have done some research to make sure that this is where you want to go. Avery is a rock star with short-term rentals. So don't go anywhere because we are going to dive right into it. You are listening to Real Estate Investing with Mighty Mike. I am your host, Mighty Mike, and in this show, you will learn the tips, tools, and tactics for investing in real estate and building long-term wealth. I interview some of the top real estate investors that you know and love. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
This is Avery Carl, and you're listening to The Mighty Mike Show.
What's up, you guys? I am super excited. Welcome to the show, Avery.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And so those of you guys that don't know Avery, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction. She was named one of Wall Street Journal's top 100 and Newsweek's top 500 agents. She and her team have closed over $1 billion in real estate sales, and she herself owns 100 doors. And she just told me she and her team are the top 10, just earned 2021's top 10 of, was it Wall Street Journal?
Yeah.
Wow, that is impressive. And so I am super just excited to have you on the show and to dive into short-term rentals. In real estate investors, Avery, are my people. Those are my people. I just love them. And so having you on here with this, all of the knowledge that you're ready to present, I'm just super excited. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And so let's dive into a little bit about who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your personal life.
Yeah, so I grew up in Starkville, Mississippi, went to University of Texas on a soccer scholarship, and then toured in a all-girl punk rock band for a few years after undergrad, and eventually landed kind of backed into real estate investing and being a real estate agent. I have 102 doors in my portfolio, 8 of which are short-term rentals, and the rest are single family and duplex long-term rentals, and then a few between 10 and 26 unit multis. I was able to scale that portfolio from 0 to 100 over the course of about 5 years because I invested heavily in short terms towards the beginning of my portfolio, and they just cash flowed so much heavier than traditional long terms that I was able to scale much more quickly if I had started with traditional long terms. And then in terms of my real estate team, so I started the short-term shop. We are real estate agents that focus exclusively on short-term rental investors. We have offices in 10 vacation markets. Also started a mortgage company to go along with that because we were having to send all of our clients to this lender for this, to this lender for that. So we brought all the products in-house under one roof, and that is called the Mortgage Shop.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was sitting there looking at your website, the short-term shop, and I was just sitting there wow, this is first of all, it's with EXP, right? Is that a part? Right. Is that a part of it?
So yeah, so we're a real estate team brokered by EXP.
Oh, wow. That is crazy. So everybody's kind of in there in different areas, I noticed as well, right?
Yeah. So we have different agents. We call them offices in 10 different vacation rental markets. So if you want to buy in the Smoky Mountains with us, we have 30 agents there. If you want to buy on the Emerald Coast of Florida, we have 10 agents there. I can list them off if you want to, but it might be a waste of time. You can just go to the website.
It's very interesting. Yeah. So we'll definitely put that up here at the end of the show. You guys can check out her website for short-term rentals. And we are going to dive into short-term rentals and kind of pick your brain on because you have 100 doors. How many of those doors are short-term rentals?
8.
8, got it. So, yeah, and so having a diversified portfolio, I mean, it's just makes a lot of sense, and you're diving into it, and you're leading by example. You're not just a realtor who's, trying to encourage people to do it, but you're actually doing it yourself, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I do want to point out that so I don't take a property that could be a long term that people would typically buy for a long term and go, hey, I could make more money with this if I short term it and turn it into a short term. So typically that's not the strategy that works. So for me, I buy only in vacation rental markets, like in the Smokies or in Destin, Florida. So while I have only 8 of my doors are short term, the dollar value of my portfolio is about 50% short term and 50% long term. So my short terms are much more expensive. So they make much more money because they're better rentals than just like some random long term that you decided to put on Airbnb.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. All right. Okay. Well, so we're gonna dive into short-term rentals. We're gonna talk about different things. And in your real estate journey, there's the good and the bad. There's the highs and the lows. There's the ups and the downs. But on the show, I always like to dive into your worst story. We're going to go uphill from there. We're going to go into all the best stuff and how to make money and your greatest experience. But first, let's dive into your worst experience in working in real estate or investing in real estate.
So worst experience. So to be honest with you, I haven't had too many bad experience or really any in investing yet, other than just wishing I had started earlier. But with being an agent, so the worst experience I've had as an agent. So we used to have a short-term shop office in Nashville, and it was the only market that we were in that was a metro market rather than like a vacation destination. And the regulations in Nashville were just constantly changing for short-term rentals. Like they really don't want them there. And the worst part of it was towards the end. And the reason we shut down our Nashville office was all of these. So as the areas that you were allowed to short-term in Nashville got smaller and smaller and smaller, the developers would just buy land in these areas and build these big condo and townhome developments specifically for short-term and pre-sell them before they were built. And what would happen was we'd get a bunch of clients under contract pre-construction, and then over the course of the year it would take to build, the regulations would have changed. This is no longer legal to short term here. And then it just ended in lots of lawsuits against developers and city council members and things like that. So that I would say that last little stretch of the Nashville office was probably the worst experience of my real estate career.
So yeah, that's one big thing to take away, right? Is that when you're looking at different areas to maybe invest in, like how litigious, right? Is there a possibility that this community that you're investing with will eventually say, hey, we're not okay with your short-term vacationers coming and staying here, and maybe partiers and stuff like that. That's a lot of times what I hear, Avery, is that short-term is great, but depending on the area you select, you might even pick an area like a college town that's also next to a vacation place. There's a good chance you're going to have some parties in your place, right?
Yeah, so it's really, really market dependent. So the way that I avoid anti-short-term rental regulations is I stick to areas where there's not a lot of hotel presence and that people have been staying in vacation rentals for decades and decades. Like I live on the Emerald Coast of Florida, like the Destin 30A area, and there were vacation rentals on the beach here in the 20s before there was even fully electricity here. So those regulations are very well established because they've been here a long time. You see regulations happening is in metro markets where there's a lot of people who live there. It's not dependent on tourism. And like Nashville, for example, everybody up until about 10 years ago when they're coming to visit Nashville would stay in hotels. So now that all these Airbnb investors have come along, hotels are losing market share. So that hotels and primary homeowners are the two things that contribute to anti-short-term rental regulations. So if you stick to an area that's dependent on tourism, even the primary homeowners that live there understand, there's, of course, you don't want them opening up next door to you, but it's like kind of the price you pay for living in a market like this. And then as far as partiers, if you ask the right questions before they book, they'll typically tell on themselves and you can kind of avoid that. And then also not slamming too many people into a property. So I know a lot of people subscribe to the heads and beds method where, maybe you have a 4-bedroom, but it sleeps, 6 people per room. I avoid that. I only let 2 people per room plus an extra 2. So that's like 2 couples per room plus maybe a couch bed, because I don't want those partiers. So there's a few ways to mitigate that, but at some point you probably will have a party.
Yeah. But then at the end of the day, right, like you just clean it up and kind of move on. And so, but let's go back to Nashville really quick. And so, how would you want my mighty nation, my listeners what do you want to take from that story? Like, how can we make sure that we never have that kind of experience with the Nashville?
To choose your market wisely. So check the regulations, and buy in areas that short-term rentals have been a thing that exists since well before Airbnb ever existed.
Yeah. So like for example, in Orlando, we have, I'm in Orlando here, and just south of us, we have the Kissimmee Disney area. But you know
Mhm.
what? Disney's very much like right in the middle of all these counties. And so if you go just north of Disney, just a little bit, you end up having where they don't allow short-term rentals. And because like you said, there's people who live there, there's a ton of hotels there. And then in that same area near there's a lot of people who actually have just communities. Like they don't want short-term rental people live coming in around them, right?
Right.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, good. All right, so that's your worst experience. Definitely, when it comes to short-term rentals, that's something to consider, and just a wonderful story. But what is your greatest experience? Let's dive into that. Like, what did you do in real estate that just like this is the thing you go into parties and tell people about?
So for me, at the short-term shop, we also teach all of our clients how to self-manage their properties remotely so that they don't have to pay a property manager 25% of their gross. So for me, the most rewarding thing and the greatest thing in my real estate career is when a client emails me, maybe they bought something last year, maybe they bought it a few months ago, and says something like, "Hey, thank you so much for helping us through this and through this journey and getting us this property and teaching us how to manage it. One of us is able to stay home with the kids now, or I'm finally able to afford to put my mom, get my mom the care that she needs medically and things like that." So when it's impacted them in a financial way that has then impacted, their well-being and their quality of life, that's the most rewarding thing to me.
That is awesome. Yeah, being able to set it up. I've seen some people, Avery, set up their Airbnb app. A couple of my friends that do it pretty heavily, and they just run everything from their app. And with automation, the different automations they have set
Mhm.
up for having the cleaning people come in, and it almost becomes like 100% automated, where you're basically just doing everything on your phone. You have people that are taking care of this thing. Is that what you pretty much have experienced?
Pretty much. So you're now just kind of managing the systems rather than managing the property.
Yeah, versus having like a long-term tenant that's in there that, you're getting a steady cash flow, and it's not a whole lot of maintenance that's required, but at the same time, the cash flow isn't even close to the same, right?
Right. So I have less maintenance costs on my short terms than I do on my long terms. Just because with short terms, you have a professional cleaner in there 2 to 3 times a week. They're going to let you know before anything falls into any, significant area of disrepair or significant level of disrepair. Whereas, my long-term tenants are doing God knows what in there for how many years. And I pretty much know when a long-term tenant moves out, I'm at least doing flooring, paint,
Yeah.
maybe having to do cabinets. You just don't know. It just depends on the tenant. So I pretty much know I'm going to have to spend 5 to 10,000 when a tenant moves out. Whereas the short terms, they just keep rolling through and you don't really have to worry about that.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of like just keeping up on everything. All right, that's great. So what are you working on right now that you're just most fired up about? I mean, you've made some pretty big headlines. Is it so what's next? Like what are you doing now?
I'm most excited about my mortgage company. I think so we started that about 6 months ago. It's going really, really well, and we've got some really great products. And I'm super happy to be able to help people get the financing that they need to be able to buy the property that they can then change their lives with.
Okay, so as a realtor, I mean, you're an investor, you're a realtor, now you're doing the mortgage thing. is there anything you need to be worried about? Because I know a lot of the people who watch that are realtors are thinking like, yeah, but isn't that a conflict? Like, how are you working that?
I hired a very expensive RESPA and compliance attorney to handle all of that for me and tell me what to do.
That's pretty smart of you.
Or do you mean like, so that's in terms of the mortgage company, but in terms of being a conflict of interest that I'm also an investor?
Yeah. So just in terms of like, let's say I'm your realtor, but then I also have this mortgage company. Is it just where you just have a different person handling it if you're handling
Oh
the
yeah,
sale?
yeah. I'm not a loan officer. No, I have hired loan officers, and I have a partner who is a loan officer who handles all the operations. I just handle like everything else, basically.
Yeah, because I mean, you're doing big things, but people are watching might be doing okay in real estate, right, or okay in mortgage, and they're like, well, I want to do that too, you know. So I always like
They
to,
can. You can.
yeah,
Absolutely
yeah,
can.
definitely. You can dive into different things. And so, okay, Mighty Nation, we have been getting some major value. Avery's just been bringing it left and right, her different stories that have just kind of like along her journey. And so prepare yourself because we're headed into the Mighty Flex round right after a word from our sponsors. And honestly, today I'm just going to mention them. I don't have a special video. They're my new sponsor, Vulcan 7. They are what I use to do all my cold calling and I get all the different leads and stuff. So love it. So guys, welcome back to the show. Avery, are you ready to do some mighty flexing?
I sure am.
Okay, so some of these are going to seem kind of trivial, but they are so impactful for somebody who's on the come up and trying to make it happen. Okay, what is your favorite tactic for finding deals, short term or otherwise?
Just networking. Relationship is relationship. Real estate is very much a relationship game. So just networking with people and I hate the word networking, by the way. It's so douchey, but that's what I said. So I'm going to stick with it. But definitely building relationships because that's where the deals come from.
Yeah. And network marketing has kind of gotten a bad name, right? Kind of a bad rap, the Primericas and Cutcos of the world. I mean, I know great people in those businesses, but yeah, anytime you're pressuring someone to get into it kind of gives that networking thing a bad name. But I'll tell you, networking, your friendships, like on my leads, when I do my prospecting, I don't know how you've done it, but I always put, make friends, make 10 friends today. You know what I mean? Because really that's what we're talking about when we're talking about networking. If you're doing it right, is you're trying to build friendships and solve problems for other people, right?
Exactly.
So for finding deals, for finding real estate deals, you networking. So you get stuff sent to you then.
Pretty much. Yeah.
People are like, hey, have you seen this one over in the Smoky Mountains? That's awesome. I love that. I love that whole area. That area for short term is just popping, right?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah. So what is your favorite tactic? I'm sorry, are there any softwares that you use that make your life easier?
Calendly, honestly, I've moved past software and it's people now. My VAs definitely make my life 100% easier. I have 3 of them. And if we count my husband's we have 4.
4 VAs. Wow. What's your favorite way to find VAs? Because I know there's a bunch of different ways.
So what works best for me, and it might not work best for everyone if you need like a part-time VA, but I need full-time out of all of mine. So I use my Outdesk.
Your what?
My Outdesk.
Oh, okay.
They're
Yeah,
all
definitely
related, like real estate focused VAs.
Okay, very cool. And then, do you know what country they're out of? Is it a specific?
So it is an American company, but the VAs are in the Philippines.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, oftentimes that's a very good place to get them. The Philippines, they usually speak very well English, and they're very good, very affordable.
Yeah.
All right. And then, what is your favorite way as a real estate investor to fund a deal, to find the money? Where do you get the money?
DSCR loans are by far my favorite, especially when it comes to short term. So with my multis, that's typically like a local bank that does a lot of apartment buildings that you have to find and build a relationship with. But for short terms, DSCR loans, which stands for debt service coverage ratio, those have been around for other types of real estate for a long time, but they're very difficult to find when it comes to short term. and the mortgage shop can do them for 15% down. And you're not qualified based off of your own debt to income. You're qualified based off of what the property will make, and it only has to make the same amount as what the mortgage will be for you to qualify. So 15% down, not going off of your own personal debt to income. The sky's kind of the limit there.
That's awesome. That's a great tip. Definitely, guys. I hope you're taking notes. And then what do you look for? Have you JV'd on any of your deals? If so, like, what are you looking for in a JV partner?
So I have on 2 at the beginning of our career. And the way that we structured that was we were out of DTI. They did not have DSCR loans back then for short term. And we were out of DTI. So we had a money partner. He got the loans in his name. We did a 50-50 partnership. But at the beginning, we paid him X amount per month. I call it a mini mortgage out of our half until our half of the down payment was paid off. And then it was a straight 50-50. He did the money. We did all the management. But we got out of that 2 years ago. And actually, there is a way, if you're in a partnership and you're ready to get out and move on to your own thing, you can 1031 exchange the proceeds from that there's a certain way to do it. I'm certainly not a 1031 person. Dave Foster is the best in the business, and he did that for us. So we 1031 exchanged our buyout from those 2 properties into a bigger property.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Anytime you can move the money and you don't have to, the government's not like, hey, that's the way, that's definitely the way to do it. Yep. Very cool. Very cool. Major value there. So, okay. So now this is one of the questions that people in short-term rental, they struggle with if they don't do it right. Right. So what do you look for in a property manager? How do you pick your property management company?
I do not use property managers. We self-manage. I recommend self-managing because the way technology is nowadays, it takes 30 minutes to an hour a week for you to manage multiple properties. And the average property management company split is about 25% right now. And to give a little context, a little perspective, not context. If I paid a property manager this year on my 8 properties, I would have paid them $200,000. And I've got better places to put $200,000.
Yeah, exactly. So short-term rental, that's one of the things, right? Is like it's 10% for like long-term. And
right.
Then for short-term, you're dealing with such a high percentage because of the turnover of tenants, right?
Right. And then all of my long terms I have on third-party property management because that's an entirely different beast. That's checking credit scores, doing background checks, showing them properties, things like that, for 10% of a much smaller amount per month as well.
Yeah. And I love that because, with Airbnb, like if somebody messes up, they can only mess up like one time with a unit. And then Airbnb is like, hey, you can't use our app anymore. Mm-hmm. And then now you don't have to worry about them. Or if they just have low ratings, right? For those that don't know about Airbnb, you can actually just decline, right? If somebody books one of your rooms, can you look at their rating and then decline them?
You can, but that hurts your, search ranking.
Rating.
So you want to convince them that they don't want to stay there rather than hit the decline button.
So you just reach out to them and be like, by the way, yeah, hey, I just want to let you know we're having some hard time with the neighbors are loud and whatever.
Yeah. Or if they say something like, oh, what thread count are your sheets? And you're like, oh my God, this person's going to be really high maintenance. You just say, oh, they are Jersey. We got them from, they're microfiber. We got them from Target for $15. Because who's asking that question wants the super nice sheets. You say, no, we have shitty sheets.
That's funny. Actually, we got them at Goodwill. No.
Yeah. There's a stain on them.
There's a few stains. I hope you're okay with that. You can cancel if you'd like. That's funny. That is funny. Okay, so so some of the Airbnb questions, like specifically for short-term rentals, what do you have to do? Is there any worry? Like, because I know some people will actually market their listing outside of Airbnb. Do you at all worry that Airbnb, or do you do that first of all?
So, sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah. So I know some people that will try to market their properties directly to the consumer, kind of cutting out Vrbo or Airbnb. Do you list in multiple places or are you exclusive to one platform?
So we stay so booked on Airbnb and VRBO that we don't list anywhere else just to complicate our lives. There is a whole like direct booking movement now trying to get direct bookings, but it's just so little for the amount of work that like I have better things to do. I have other things to do. I'm staying super booked on those 2 platforms. So that's where it's staying for now.
Got it. Yeah. So this, just to touch on that, so that, is there any specific company or anything that's helping people direct that that you know of? People who are trying to go direct to consumer?
I think OwnerRes is one that you can set that up through. I think there's another one maybe called, I don't exactly know how to pronounce it. It's Hoofy or Halfy, Houfy. There's a few of them. Pretty
Very
easy to
cool.
find.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, great. That's great. So now when you're setting up a short-term rental, you know, people think about it, people, especially people who already have rentals. What would you say is the best way that somebody could get started in short-term rentals?
Read my book, Short Term Rental, Long Term Wealth.
Love it. Love it. We'll definitely put a link to that in the description. Do you have it on Audible?
It is on Audible, yes. You can get it on Amazon, the Bigger Pockets bookstore, so biggerpockets.com/STR book, or on Audible, Kindle.
Definitely. Definitely. We'll put that down in the description. And, one of the things I always like to say is, figuring out advice. Since I started the show, I've just had on so many people like yourself that are just full of knowledge. And so, but I'm always curious, like with my guests, like what is the greatest advice you've ever received?
Greatest advice I've ever received is winners focus on winning and losers focus on winners.
That's powerful. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, focus on winning. What are the things that are going to get you to the place that you need to, or be first, right? I love the be, do, and have philosophy. And so focusing on yourself and improving yourself and then doing the things you need to do. And then the things that you want are going to come. If you're looking at other people, then it's only going to hold you back. Compare and despair, they say.
Right, exactly.
Love it. Love it. All right. And so this is a question that gets some of my guests. And so I'm curious because you've achieved a lot of success, but what would you do if you had to start all over again with just $100, a smartphone, and a car? We got no contacts, no credit history, no assets, but you have all of the same skills and knowledge that you have today. How would you start over?
I would talk to as many people as possible, provide helpful information on as many public forums, whether it's Facebook groups or anything else as possible related to what it is that you're doing or where it is that you're selling. And eventually the clients will find you rather than you having to go pay for a bunch of leads that, maybe they clicked on a button on a Google ad and don't really want to be called and you're having to cold call them or whatever. I'm not a big fan of that. So I'm a bigger fan of adding value so that people ask you about it than you having to go chase them down.
I love that because so many people that I work with that like come onto my team or just come into my sphere of people, I meet with them and they talk about like, well, I don't want to cold call because I do cold call. I'll call 1,000 people a day on a dialer, actually only have 30, 40 conversations and those may turn into something, they may not, but that's what I'm good at. But I always tell people when they come on, that may not be good for you. Like imagine putting the same amount of effort in going into a Facebook group, going into these different groups, niche groups, maybe even divorce attorneys or probate attorneys. And because you have all the same skills and knowledge you have today, so you can then apply that in those groups to be able to make a connection, right? And to build what we talked about earlier, your network.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, see, that makes so much sense. And I always tell people, but I also have to warn people, right? Avery is like, you can't just become a realtor and then start posting on Instagram.
Right. You have to add value somewhere. Yeah.
Right. Like, they may be great posts. You may look cute in the post, but it doesn't mean that you're going to make real estate your business. And so that's the important thing is provide value. When I make the phone calls, that's what I'm doing. I'm answering questions. I'm trying to solve problems. And so the same thing can be done in these groups like that. That's great. Love that. So what is your parting piece of advice for Mighty Nation, my listeners today?
I would say my parting piece of advice would be ready, fire, aim. So just take off running and you can figure out everything as you go.
Yeah, very true. A lot of people get into analysis paralysis. And if you're an analytical and you're sitting there going through the numbers, you're very smart. So congratulations as an analytical. You know everything before you get started. But unfortunately, you're not going to get anything done if you don't take action. So I love that. Avery, what is the best way that we can connect with you? And then we can say goodbye.
You can find me on our website at theshorttermshop.com or on Instagram at theshorttermshop. And we are hiring agents in almost every market that we're in. So hit me up.
Awesome. You know what? I just appreciate you coming on the show. I want to personally thank you. And I've been impressed with everything you have going on online. I was just sitting there looking at the short-term shop, and I'm excited to share it with the world.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys. So go check out the website and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Mighty Mike Show. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you've been hanging out with me and Avery today. So go find your network, go provide value out there, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks, Avery.
Thank you.
See you guys.